Welcome to Section 6, Video 3, setting up our sub-interactable objects. In this video we are going to create our sub-interactable object and then create blueprint interactable objects without inheriting from our interactable actor. So we are going to be working only in Blueprint for this video, so inside of our Blueprints folder, inside of our Gameplay Elements folder, we're going to add another folder and we're going to name it Interactables. Inside of here, we're going to right-click, select Blueprint Class. Inside of our search, we're going to search for the interactable actor, which is our custom actor that we created. And we're going to name this blueprint actor Door Interact BP. Let's open it up. And inside of our components, we're going to add in a static mesh. For our static mesh, we're going to set it to SM Door. Let's compile and save. And inside of our class settings, you can see we already inherit the interface for interaction interface. So we already have this set up. So we can actually close the Door Interact BP and we're ready for that interaction actor. So now we can start on our blueprint actors that don't inherit from the interact actor. So we're going to add a new blueprint class, and it's going to derive from actor, and we're going to name this one Bouncing Cube Interact BP. Now first what we're going to do is we're going to add a cube component, which is just going to be a static mesh, but we already have one set up for a cube, which is pretty much a default thing that Unreal has set up because so many people use cube, sphere, and plane as like basic components. And we're going to click and drag it and make it our default scene or root. And inside of our cube details, we're going to set our simulate physics to true, which is going to change our collision preset to physics actor. If we uncheck the simulate physics boolean, it will set it back to block all dynamic. So we're going to want that true, compile, save. And now what we're going to do is go into our class settings, and under the interfaces category, we have no inherited interfaces and no implemented interfaces. So we're going to add an implemented interface by clicking add and then enter in the interaction interface. Here what we are doing is implementing our interface within Blueprint so that way we can still receive any function within that interface that is being called or relates to that interface, which in this case is the onInteract function. It is important to remember that whenever you implement an interface only in Blueprint, you must compile that blueprint immediately after so that it can register the interface's functions so that we may use it within code. So right now, if we go into the event graph and try calling the onInteract function, it will not work. So we have to compile. And now if we right click and type in onInteract, it allows us to actually use it as an event. But we're going to do that in a future video. So inside of our variables, we're going to add two float variables, one named jump strength, and let's compile the blueprint so we can set the default value to 500. And for our second float variable, we're going to name it hit strength. And we're going to make this default value a very large number, so 100,000. Let's add a bit of some code. So we're going to add the event point damage, which occurs whenever this actor receives any of the Unreal specific damage type, which is going to be point damage. And we're going to drag out the execution pin and add impulse at location. We're going to have the one that has the cube in parentheses, so that way we don't have to click and drag it into the event graph. It's just already made for us. For our location, we're just going to use the hit location. For our normal, what we're going to do is multiply by a float, and we're going to drag the result into the impulse. And for our float value, we're going to drag out of that and multiply again by the int, and we're going to put the integer to -1. And for the float value, we're going to use hit strength. So we can click and drag it and just make it equal B, as it says. which means we just drag it over and it will automatically connect it for us. And we hit compile, no errors. So at this point now what we're going to do is we're going to drag out of the execution pin of the add impulse at location and then draw a debug string. For our text location, we're just going to use get actor location. And for our text, we're just going to say, ow, stop it, because this is meant to show that the cube is getting hurt. For our color, let's just change it to something like red. It's easy to see. And for our duration, let's set it to 2.5. That seems to be a very common number, reasonable number. And let's compile and save. So any point damage that we receive will apply an impulse to the cube at a specific location and print out a debug string showing that it was hurt. The impulse is a bit of vector math that uses the magnitude of a vector, which in this case is the hit normal, which originally is facing the player, but when we multiply it by the -1 value, it flips it, so that way it's facing towards the cube instead of away from the cube. And when it's facing towards the cube, it's going to push the cube away from us, which is what we want. And then we increase the amount of strength of that push to our hit strength. We can actually test this by going into the map and dragging the cube into the level. Since it's simulating physics, let's put it above ground since it's going to just fall to the ground. And when we shoot it, it bounces around. And it gets affected to where it got hit. Now what we're going to do is close this, and we're going to add another interact actor, adding the blueprint class. We're going to make it an actor, and we're going to name this NPC Interact BP. So before we do anything, we're going to go to our class settings and implement our interface, which is interaction interface, compile, and we're going to add a scene, and we're going to name this one root. And we're going to make that the default scene. And then we're going to add a skeletal mesh. And then we're going to add another scene. And we're going to name this message location. For our skeletal mesh, we're going to set its mesh to a engine specific mesh that comes with the engine. So we can click on view options and select show engine content. And we're going to use tutorial TPP. And we're going to set the anim class to tutorial TPP as well. For our message location, we're just going to move it up to its eyes. And let's save and compile. And in our skeletal mesh, we're going to go down into its collision and change it from no collision to block all dynamic. Compile and save. In the next video, we will be adding functionality to our sub-interactable objects.